11 million that the government claims. What we'll actually have is 194 million Nigerians in poverty. And given what I see in my line of work, and I don't doubt that 194 million people in this country cannot spend up to $5 a day. It or 3,950 naira per day. It's ridiculous, and you have to what they call it. Help me now.
What are you trying to say?
See, you have to hold to account the people who have spent millions and billions
Okay.
on so-called social intervention programs that have not made a dent and instead have this, because something like poverty is not what you go to hand out trader money. It's what you do, it's stuff that you do, systemic interventions. Systemic interventions means making sure that there's food available. Making sure that there's food available means not having policies that actually reduce the amount of food available to people. Let's start from that basis.
So I agree with Cheta, and I'm really surprised that Sarah people is even looking for a probe. And the reason is simple. These social intervention programs were never designed to solve any problem.
Why would you say that? And tell me, you need to give us the reason
So
behind that.
you set up a program, you say trader money, you say 10,000 naira, 10,000 naira to a trader. You don't take down the trader's details. You don't take out anything that you can use, any information you could use to track down the trader. Then months later, we had reports where state coordinators openly confessed they couldn't find the beneficiaries of the monies they gave. Yes.
So what are you saying those programs were for then? If not social intervention,
You don't
money
you
releasing?
cannot lift anybody out of poverty with 10K. Shokbe. It's not gonna happen. It has never happened. It will never happen. 5K, 10K, it's not happening. So even the amount being given tells you that it's not designed to solve any problem. So what are we talking about? What are we wasting our time discussing?
All right. Well, you heard the man. Let's move on. We'll take this next article in from, hold on one second, The Guardian newspaper. Betrayals and internal strife stand against Southeast quest for presidency. Chesa, take us through this.
I think this is a fallout of Chukuma Soludo's the diatribe from last week, where he wrote, where he sat down with his chisel and tablets to carve a 4,000 word epistle against Peter Obi, and you have to wonder, as a governor of a complete state, where did he find time to be carving 4,000 words? And he said it's part one, so part two now there. Just let us have that in context. Another 4,000 words. Is he governing or carving?
Are you trying to tell me that as the governor of Anambra State, he can't do more than two things at the same time? More than three?
Considering the heaps of refuse I saw in Onitsha just this weekend, then he should be focusing on his states. Anyway, this is, I think, for the record, because I'm one of those who has said that Peter Obi is not a messiah, and I got shellacked for it. But the key thing for me, being an Igbo man, is our leaders from that part of the country have a problem.
Our representatives, not our leaders. They're not leaders. Continue.
Okay. It's easy to focus on Soludo and his theatrics, but I'd rather not. So sorry for the initial.
And yes, you did.
Yeah, sorry for that. I allowed my emotions get the better on me. Soludo is simply he calls himself solution sometimes. Soludo is simply a manifestation of a larger issue. And I think it's fair to point this out, to start by pointing this out, that Nigerians as a whole generally despise and do not trust their leaders. It is poverty that gives most of these leaders power, and take that weaponization of poverty away, or in the alternative, build alternative centers of wealth, and almost all of the participants in Nigeria's current leadership structure will be rendered irrelevant. Having said that, this focus is on the Southeast or Igbo people. Prior to the Civil War, we had a class of leaders, M.I. Okpara being the most prominent of them, who were of the people, and they reciprocated. So, according to Paul Amber's book, Paul Amber wrote a seminal book about Igbo politics back in '67. He said that between 1954 and 1964, Eastern Nigeria was the fastest growing economy anywhere in the world. Unfortunately, that fast growth was brought to a halt by the events of 1966 to 70, and the region has not recovered. One thing I think needs to be clear to a lot of people is that Ani Igbo has not recovered from the Civil War. In our heads, let's start with that. It is post-traumatic stress disorder that every December, all of us, as much as possible, will rise up and clog up the highways. That's PTSD. So where am I building up to? I think that the seminal event of the Civil War wasn't even the shooting. It was the post-Civil War settlement of the 20 pounds thing, where by executive military fiat, all Igbo men were rendered poor. It created a crabs in a barrel kind of situation from in the entire group, including the leadership, and that thing opened a vacuum. So we now had a situation where so-called Igbo leaders were not leaders of the people, but leaders of themselves. It's just their interest. It's crabs in a barrel. And that kind of leadership vacuum is what led to demagogues like Nnamdi Kanu coming up. It's that simple. There's a leadership vacuum in the Southeast, and it allows for narcissistic and very selfish people to try and rise up. And what we see in Soludo's case, as an example, is that innate envy. He wants to be the number one. He doesn't want any other person to be there. So when Peter Obi is of the political class, it's important to put that out there. He's from the same political class. He's a two-time governor of Anambra State. However, and for some reason, a lot of the Nigerian youth have chosen to project their want for a better leadership on him. I think it's because of his reputation for frugality and because he's easily accessible. So it's something that they haven't seen for a long time. So they have chosen to project on him. And you see people like Soludo, Umahi, Ikpazu, Uzodinjo, they are very jealous.
Uzo who?
The one in your state. They are very jealous of him. So what is happening is classic crabs in a barrel kind of behavior where they are trying to pull him down so that they will pull him down and then climb over him. For the record, I think that Soludo is an attention-seeking egomaniac. It is not the first time that he's doing
Cheta?
this. He wrote against Dora Konyile. He wrote against Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. He didn't write against the mismanagement of the economy by Buhari when he was on the Buhari Economic Advisory List. That level of hypocrisy is what we're talking about.
Your messages have come in. Oh boy. All right. MI from Makoka says biggest lesson learned in 2015 is that elections have consequences. Whilst Julius says there are no 194 million Nigerians in the first place. There's no way that we are more than 140 million people in this country.
I completely
The
agree,
stats
Julius.
are lies.
I completely agree, Julius. The population in Nigeria is political. But since that is what they tell us, we have to use those figures.
He says Cheta Nwaeze knows better now. Let's see. This one in from Eze. He says trader money, school feeding program, etc. Those are just smoke screens put up by politicians to loot money. Uses some qualifying words I can't say out loud. Tony from Ikeja says, we don't need the World Bank or any other international organization to give us the poverty statistics in Nigeria. The statistics are out there in Oyingbo and Mount 12 markets. I have the size of onions before and after 2015. Do you want the pictures? The damage is beyond statistics. And this one in from Ade, who says, I can't believe that Cheta made the statement crabs in a barrel 5 times in one analysis. Well, he was trying
Chineke, he was counting.
He was putting that point through, man. Ike says on Soludo, Cheta couldn't have put it better. Whilst Benny says the Nigerian fiat to fiascos government and CBN policies have finally nailed the coffin of Nigeria economically, in your opinion. And Ian or Ian, I think it might be Ian. This one says, laughs at what you said. Said Cheta said, "Who's on danger? Good is bad." Oh, well, I can't solve that puzzle. Moving on. Iguano says, "Very well said, Cheta. You explained the Saludo epistle and its background excellently." And Cisco Delgado says, "Cheta has spoken the truth on evil politicians." Let's move on now to this one in from the Punch newspaper. Shareholders fault CBN's 453 billion naira levy on banks. They're saying this is the Independent Shareholders Association of Nigeria, kicking against that 0.5% levy on commercial banks that had been imposed by the Central Bank of Nigeria to fund the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, saying that those levies from 2020 to the first quarter of 2022 have generated 453.7 billion naira for AMCON. And they're saying that despite the creation of the corporation as the federal government's debt recovery agency, it's only recovered 1.4 trillion naira since its inception. So why is all their money going over to them in the levies? Mr. C, what do you make on this? Do you think this is just complaints, or is there nuggets behind all of this?
Okay, thank you, Shopper. So let's get some context to the story. The Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria was set up to save the banking sector because at a point in time, the banking sector was bedeviled with huge toxic loans mostly taken by powerful individuals and companies who were not servicing their loan obligations as at when due. Mm-hmm. So the corporation came in to buy those toxic bank loans so they could be taken off the individual balance sheets of the banks so the banks could remain stable. Now, as part of that process, 0.5% of the was charged from the bank's total assets on and off the balance sheet. And it is that money that has partly funded the AMCON since then. Now, I'm a bit surprised when they describe 1.4 trillion as paltry, because they must take into consideration the fact that if the loans are not yet due for repayment, then you cannot call them in. There's a process, there's procedure. So until the loans become faulty or they've gone very bad, you cannot call them in. If the loans are being serviced as a when due, interest payments are being made as per the loan agreements, then it is premature. Yes, Cheta.
You've never taken a loan from a Nigerian bank.
I have actually.
Let's just say continue.
So it is premature to do that. Now, when they say that the 0.5% is impacting the banks, do they really understand what 0.5% is? It's not up to 1%, and it's on the total assets. In the corresponding period, almost all the banks have posted nice profit figures. There is no evidence to support the contention by this shareholders group that it is negatively impacting the activities of the banks. And if we were to give credence to their position and take away this funding, how is AMCON supposed to be funded? If you take away this leg of funding, what do you replace it with? We all know the current situation, economic situation in the country. The banks are not complaining. So it's a real mystery that this shareholders group is the one complaining. What's your interest? Your money is, okay, the monies are there, actually. The monies are there. But however, the banks who do the day-to-day business are not complaining. And even if they had to complain, there's an appropriate channel through which they will complain.
Always on the appropriate channels. Not that many people are regarding the appropriateness.
They have the figures. So you has the facts, they have the figures.
Okay. This day, House Senate failed to shift deadline for Naira redesign. So we heard Senate's a plenary talked about the Naira redesign, or put it up for consideration, and whilst they were generally in favor of this because of the reasons I have been given quite a bit already, they did try to shift the deadline for this for all old notes to go back into the banks from January 31st to April 30th next year. Apparently, nah.
So it's no surprise that they tried to pull the stunt, because Nigerian politicians, especially the ones in the current National Assembly, have continued to demonstrate that the interests of the general public do not necessarily align with their own interests.
Stunt.
Yeah, it's a stunt because really and truly, right? This is a measure we haven't redesigned the naira in about 20 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the CBN has carefully explained what it's supposed to achieve theoretically: reduce the amount of money outside the banking circulation, reduce the ability of terrorists and like-minded criminals to fund the activities,
Mm-hmm.
and to ensure that people who've looted the treasuries at federal and state levels are unable to return those monies into the system. That is the idea on paper. Whether it will actually work is a different conversation. Now, the senators come out and they give all sorts of reasons. The senator from Abia State said the CBN governor should come and throw more light. What
Abia
further?
has a senator.
Yes, they do. They have three, Cheta. Now, what further light does he?
Igbo leaders.
Representatives. They're representatives. What further light does he want the CBN governor to come and throw? One of the senators from Borno State made this interesting statement. There are only 5 banks in 27 local government areas in Borno State. I've not been able to cross-check or verify that statement, but I find it very shocking because in the state
Why?
capital, no, in the state capital, he cannot suggest to me that there are only 5 banks operating. I'm sorry.
So let's start with the obvious. A good percentage of Borno State is either contested territory or not under Nigerian control.
Cheta, I get that. The state capital
Number
is
two,
not under
one of
terrorist
the
control.
things that the terrorists did, which is basically one of the things that you do in war, is knockout communications. Communication infrastructure in Borno State has been problematic.
Cheta, I agree.
Okay, sorry.
Maiduguri is the state capital. It's not under terrorist control.
Mr. C, going on with your point.
So they tried their best to get some resolution passed that the deadline be extended, and they gave all sorts of reasons that the people in the rural areas who will not be able to get their money back in time. In all of it,
I mean, is there no validity to that?
So there's some merit in that, but guess what,
Mm-hmm.
Sope? We're still in November, right? So we still have 1 week in November to go. We have 4 weeks in December, and then it ends last on the 31st of January. So literally, we have 9 weeks to do that. Are you suggesting to me today that a villager who has money at home will not find a bank to deposit that money into within the next 9 weeks?
It's your privilege talking.
Mr. C,
It's your privilege talking.
In 9 weeks. No, Cheta, this is a function of time. It's not privilege.
See, go to. So, for example, the last time I was in Offa, I was shocked at the number of banks there were. 3. Which is the point. In rural Nigeria, and rural Nigeria is a very different animal from urban Nigeria. The infrastructure deficit is huge.
Cheta, 9 weeks. 9
Mr.
weeks.
C,
63 days.
Yes. Sorry.
24 hours each day.
We have
24
to,
hours each. Okay, Mr.
we
C,
have to
now you're
make-
just splitting
Yeah,
hairs.
we have to make the case for our rural brethren. That's the honest reality. It's a very tough situation that they live in, but we need to at least.
So my
empathize.
point is, at least start the process. It is clear even to the blind that deadline would have to be extended, but not. But at least Nigerians like to put things off to the very last second.
I like how you're saying it. So it is clear that deadline will have to be extended.
It's looking.
It's okay.
It's clear
Okay.
because it was unrealistic in the first place.
Okay. So I'm now back at square one with you.
So back to square one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The senators have their own individual reasons why they want it extended.
But I'm sorry, when they have their own reasons, but at the end of the day, for the general populace, and a number of whom are in rural dwelling communities, are those reasons not intersecting with their reasons and their needs to be able to get their cash into the banks within the time frame? So if you're saying that deadline is clearly going to need to be extended,
so you should ask me why I say it will be clearly extended. You cannot have that sort of deadline 3 weeks before a major election. Let's stop fooling yourselves.
Why not?
No, gentlemen,
I'm
let's
sorry.
move on
The
now
rea-
to this article in from the Guardian newspaper. Military airstrikes kill 16 Boko Haram terrorists in Borno. And now, Cheta, I'm going to come to you a couple of minutes only because I'd like to take some messages as well.
No, I'll take it very quickly. It's not in war studies, which I know that a lot of these military guys do. At the end of the day, you so basically you have three main strategic terrains. That's what they call them. You have land, you have sea, you have air. And ultimately, the most powerful element in any terrain is the man with the gun. You can bomb from the air and all of that, but you still need to go down with the gun. So it's all well and good telling us that, oh, we are bombing here and bombing there and all of that. But when are we going to have a situation where we have boots on the ground in Malumfatori?
Okay, hold on one second. VOK says, did I hear Cheta said there are only three banks in Offa Kwara State or in Offa Kwara State or another Offa? Because if it's in that state, in Kwara State, then there are more than 8 banks there. I'll take this one
Well,
in.
when I was there, and it's of Aquara State, when I was there in 2001 February, there were only three banks operating.
And
Maybe more have opened.
Steven says, wow, speak to the senior bankers regarding this AMCON levy and see what they have to say. Tayo says, if the politicians have their way, there would be no Naira redesign. They just want to sit and complain before television. No, we have messages coming in. This one in from Jim says, the cash in rural communities is minimal. They don't need the extension. And hold on one second. Um, there are more messages, but okay. This one in from Yinka Bolu says, Mr. C, okay, let's take this. As of 2009, only one bank is in Shinkafi in Zamfara State, and they close at noon. The same year, only one bank was in Talatamafara, and that's an old bank. I served there back then, so anything can happen up there. Oh boy, let's see if we can take this one from the Daily Post. NANS demands urgent help for suffering Nigerian students in the UK. The National Association of Nigerian Students condemning the horrendous challenges faced by Nigerian students in the United Kingdom,
Okay.
and saying that the federal government should step in.
Well, I don't know what Nance is on about, but let's address the story. So, we've discovered that in the past 1 year, possibly 18 months, at least 34,000 Nigerians have gotten student visas to the UK. And recent reports suggest that 32,000 Nigerians followed these 34,000 Nigerians. Now, what has happened is, in applying for a visa, you represent to the country that you have all the resources required to sustain yourself whilst in that country, and you will not have to resort to public spending over there. Now, what has happened is some agents, some dubious and unproductive agents, have misled some Nigerians. So some Nigerians have moved with their entire families under the impression that whatever they paid as a school fees covers their accommodation and every other cost. Then they get
1 year.
for 1 year. Then they get to the UK and reality sets in, and they don't have a place to stay. We hear reports of Nigerians hiding out in libraries, school libraries, public libraries, hanging out all over the place, and now they run the risk of being deported because they have fraudulently misrepresented to the UK government that they had the resources to sustain themselves for a year, and they clearly do not. Now, Nan says they're going to shut down the British High Commission. Seriously, how?
Nance is just all this, a looter without sense.
That's you, Mrs.
So they're just a bunch of. I think Nans, they don't fully appreciate or understand the situation. The UK government
They are
is
not
not.
capable of appreciating all that
The
stuff.
UK government is not to blame in this matter. It is Nigerians who have fraudulently tried to game the system, probably based on a lack of understanding or just a deliberate intention to break the rules, as is wont with the typical Nigerian.
You sound like Abigail that way.
Please.
Let's take a look at your messages to end the show. This one in from Taya says, also foreign students can't access their bank accounts. Where's the intervention there? Fabian from Ekpe says, I'm disappointed in NANS. The federal government is yet to take care of the Nigerian students in Nigeria with the incessant ASU strikes, to mention a few. Now they want this same government to take care of students who went on their own abroad. All right, and that is how we end the show. Do make sure you continue the conversation. Direct all your comments that you've been directing on WhatsApp over on Twitter at Muncio C. That is Mr. C's Twitter handle. There are 3 E's behind the C, and at Chickster is for Cheta. Oh, it's been a special combination today's Freshly Pressed has been. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me for this half hour. And yeah, so we will take one of these stories and explore it in depth come that 9 o'clock hour. But before then, it's all about the sports inside the locker room. There we go. I remember this.
The stories.
I keep forgetting the names of these shows nowadays. You people